I'm Carol Spieckerman, and this is Spieckerman Speaks Retail, presented by MarketScale. Hey everyone, it's Carol, and welcome to episode 21 of Spieckerman Speaks Retail, where we navigate retail from now to next in every episode. I'm here to help all kinds of retail-focused companies land big B2B programs and cut through the noise through my latest retail trajectories. These are themes that I'm constantly creating, connecting, and mapping across all kinds of categories, borders, business models, and touch points. Today, I want to talk about a trajectory that I've been forecasting for a while, but it's really starting to take hold right now. I'm talking about the curtailing of wholesaling, brands and retailers reducing, or in some cases, completely eliminating their wholesale relationships. Now, those of us who've been in the retail business for a while used to hear the term wholesale a lot more frequently, mainly because it used to be the dominant model driving retail. Well, now, of course, there's so many other models that are competing for attention, particularly direct-to-consumer, which we always hear so much about lately. But the definition of wholesale is pretty simple. Wholesaling is the act of buying goods in bulk from a manufacturer at a discounted price and selling it to a retailer for a higher price. And I'll add that sometimes wholesalers are also manufacturers. They make the stuff and they sell it to retailers. But either way, it's all B2B. Now, I'm sure many of you already know this, so I'm not trying to give you lessons in retail terminology, but it is foundational to talking about what's going on with this curtailing of wholesale. I started and built my career in the wholesale biz, selling apparel, fashion, accessories, kids' products, and all kinds of other categories to retailers into the millions of dollars. At one time, like I said, it was pretty much the only way that brands could get their products out there in the market at scale, and one of the main ways that retailers even had products to sell. The other way being retailers making their own private brands. But even that was pretty rare because they mostly relied on others to make it for them. That was before they got all, hey, we can do this ourselves, and started building internal sourcing and brand development operations. But I digress. Now we see a mini movement underway as brands like Nike and just this month, Under Armour, make bold announcements about cutting back on wholesale. Adding a bit of spice to that, just a few days ago, Nordstrom, a retailer, said that they're going to pull back on their wholesale brand relationships. So the curtailing of wholesaling is moving in both directions, both from the supplier side and also from the retailer side. Going back to Nike, last year, Nike announced that they were going to be pulling out of about 9 retailers. Now, most of these were middle market regional players like Belk and Dillard's. Then they went on to draw a major line in the sand by shutting off direct distribution to Amazon. Under Armour just took that to a whole new level by closing 2,000 to 3,000 wholesale partner accounts. Now, maybe you had the same reaction I did when you heard that. Wow, where did they find 3,000 retailers left to do business with in the first place? But Under Armour sells to all kinds of mom and pop stores, sporting retailers, off-price retailers, and so on, so they had the room to do that. But what's going on here? Why are they doing this? Well, the short answer is because they can. Now, if you've been listening to Spieckerman Speaks Retail for a while, you know that I love retail history. So I'm going to jump in the time machine here for a minute and share a backstory for what I consider to be a watershed moment in wholesale. The moment when the slippery slope of free-for-all distribution got a whole lot slicker, eventually leading to the pullbacks that we're starting to see right now. When wholesale was the only game in town, it was considered out of the question for brands to open their own stores or even to attempt to sell to multiple competing retailers in most cases. Anyone who stepped out of line risked the ire of their retail customers and basically getting kicked out. Distribution was so much more limited, and that was cool because there were a lot more retailers around, so you could operate in one tier of retail and do a really nice business. And there was definitely a lot of hand-wringing about popping out of one of those tiers, especially going so-called down market. Brands would proudly claim that they were sold in, quote, better department stores. And I remember one such brand that dared to break free from that promise and sell to JCPenney. Now, I'm not going to name the brand because they're actually still around and they're doing really great, but it was a really controversial move. It was really big news at the time. Yeah, JCPenney was considered lower end, if only because there were so many higher end department stores than there are now, and those provided contrast that kept Penny's on its lower rung. And you also had discounters like Walmart making a lot of noise they were considered to be completely off limits to better brands. Either way, everybody was watching with clenched teeth to see if this brand would get away with selling to pennies, or if their actual better department store customers would just give them the boot. Well, nothing like that happened. They got away with it. And after throwing a bit of performative shade, other brands followed along happily because those better department stores were consolidating and dropping like flies. In other words, brands were desperate to find new distribution, and at the time, JCPenney had over 2,000 stores. This opened a floodgate, and it removed a major psychological barrier that encouraged brands to take bigger and bigger distribution risks, basically to trade brand purity for scale. Now, other brands, initially in the beauty space, dared to open their own stores, some of which operated just across the mall from their biggest department store wholesale accounts. And still, the sky did not fall. There were no repercussions. So far, so good. So brands went on to expand even further. Some began creating secondary brands for retailers like Walmart, or just selling their mainline brands to them. Slowly, distribution widened and attitudes changed. Brands stopped explaining themselves, and retailers even started to see how wider distribution for some of the brands they carried might even increase their value. I call all of this the beginning of the brand ubiquity era, where brands began to have permission to be in many places. Well, the actual trajectory is that ubiquity is the new exclusivity. And that's been true for quite some time since all of this happened. But compared to the constraints of the past, this was the beginning of the Wild West. Everyone was suddenly a lot more free to roam. Brands were basically just exercising their options. But that laid a foundation for the future, because you fast forward to the digital age, and those options have only exploded. Brands aren't just selling to multiple retailers. They're opening branded stores. They're building out e-commerce capabilities. They're selling on others' online marketplaces. And platforms like Amazon have further weakened brand purity standards. It's basically come one, come all, and it's all good. Going back to the because they can part of the brand equation, what we're really talking about with the curtailing of wholesaling is a power shift. And that shift goes back to the fundamental principle that I talk about in just about every episode, platform power. These days, the rule is, to the platform owner goes the power. Now, sometimes that's the retailer, sometimes it's the brand. And retailers that are just places that have brands no longer have a compelling platform, particularly if everybody else has those same brands. So going back to Nike, Nike's been aggressively and diligently going about building out its platform for quite some time. Nike is now a multi-format retailer that runs a connected digital engagement and data gathering brand empire, basically, all of which powers its direct-to-consumer sales and sticky brand loyalty. With that brand platform amping up, wholesale relationships aren't just a distraction. They can even be seen as a liability that compromises the Nike brand, their price controls, and at the end of the day, that dings profitability. Bottom line, Nike now has the platform, so Nike has more power. The power to just show the hand to intermediaries, some of whom were just retailers that sold brands. The Under Armour situation is similar, although they're in much earlier stages of platform building, so it's a little bit riskier for them. But for Under Armour, wholesale relationships are a distraction from platform building, and over-distribution has led to a loss of control. Control over presentation, pricing, and promotional strategies. It's a distraction they can't afford as they plot a turnaround that their CEO, Patrick Frisk, has called a 2 to 3 year journey. So they're taking the long view by curtailing that brand ubiquity. They're limiting their wholesale exposure to accounts that they believe are going to power the brand forward in a positive direction as they build their direct-to-consumer platform. Under Armour has the brand power to back off some wholesale relationships, but if its plan is successful, Under Armour's going to have the platform power to say no to many more. So Nike and Under Armour are curtailing wholesale because they can, but there are plenty of other brands that just can't play that game. At least not yet, because they're brands that rely on hooking up to retailers' platforms in order to survive. But now we have Nordstrom, a retailer, joining the wholesale curtail party. Nordstrom is leaning into a concession model with its brand partnerships, which shifts responsibility to brands for designing the brand space, setting prices, and even hiring staff within Nordstrom stores. In this model, select brands will be taking on website design and shipping costs also, and they'll be managing the online space and drop shipping and all kinds of other functions. Brands get more of the proceeds from each sale through this model, and Nordstrom gets a commission, but Nordstrom doesn't have to manage or buy inventory. Concession relationships, they're really nothing new in Europe and Asia, and I think they're going to continue to catch on in the U.S. But just like not every brand is a Nike or an Under Armour that can take the reins and control its destiny, not every retailer is in a position to turn over control to brands. I think it's a good move for Nordstrom. Through this concession model, Nordstrom is empowering its own brand and mitigating that problem of just being a place that sells brands. That benefits the brands because Nordstrom becomes a flagship location without requiring brands to take on a brick-and-mortar build-out. Nordstrom will benefit from the brands taking ownership of their spaces and creating compelling and differentiated shop-in-shops. Shifting inventory management and moving to drop shipping for some of these brands is an agile model that frees Nordstrom to do what it does best, create an awesome customer experience and overall environment that's going to beautifully showcase all of those brands. So in this case, Nordstrom has the customer experience cred and the customer experience platform to pull this off. The Nordstrom experience is wrapped around all of those individual brand experiences. And again, plenty of other retailers can't necessarily pull that off. In the absence of that customer experience ecosystem, everything would just be a disjointed experience, and the retailer would be in danger of standing for nothing. But I do say this with a few caveats. Nordstrom is definitely going to need to have some exclusive brand relationships to make this work. Also, Nordstrom should have brand-agnostic associates who can float between brands and categories to make sure that customers aren't being walled off from making multi-brand purchases. But either way, Nordstrom isn't going all in on this. It's just another option and one that they can flex in and out of as needed with particular brand relationships. So wrapping all of this together, the curtailing of wholesaling is going to accelerate as more brands exercise their options, build out their platforms, and seek to really own their brand destiny. It's going to fuel brick-and-mortar expansion as brands trade intermediary-based relationships for direct-to-consumer models. But for the short term, not to a level that's going to replace all of the store attrition that we're seeing right now. But it is a natural next step in the disintermediation of retail. So we're still very much in this brand ubiquity era, and the curtailing of wholesale isn't going to put much of a dent in that for now. For the near term, very few brands will completely do away with wholesale. It's going to be more of a hybrid situation. As I always say, the transitions from now to next go on much longer than you would think. But it definitely makes sense right now for more brands to revisit their distribution choices and recalibrate the balance between wholesale and other models, and to be honest about where they are on this platform building spectrum and set clear goals for getting there. But for brands without such lofty aspirations, those of you who want to stay in that wholesale model, diversifying distribution makes the most sense. You don't want to have all of your eggs in just a couple of wholesale baskets. Brands and suppliers that are being asked to join in this concession game, we've talked about some of the pros of having control over your space, over your pricing, and being able to leverage retailers' platforms without them running the show. But with empowerment comes accountability and investment. You're going to need to pull in creative resources and brand ambassador training, not to mention online expertise to mastermind your digital brand real estate. For you retail solution and service providers, you guys should track these shifts and understand which models various brands and retailers are pursuing before you pursue them. Their choices speak volumes about their aspirations and even their openness to third-party relationships altogether. So this episode was chock full of a few of my favorite things. We had hot topics, historical perspective, trajectory tracking, and takeaways for you guys. If you want to learn more about my platform positioning workshops, trainings, and presentations, or if you're building out content for upcoming thought leadership events, ping me directly at carol@spieckermanretail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also check my schedule on my site under Speaking at spieckermanretail.com. Thank you for listening in today. See you next time, and happy selling.